Welcome everybody to another edition of UFO Man Live. My name is UFO Man or Tim. Let's go around the circle here and introduce everybody, starting with Tommy Highway.
Hello folks, I'm Tommy Highway. I'm a former government employee. I'm a network engineer and author and also a ufologist. I'm very happy to be here with you this evening. And Tim, my brother, as always, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thomas.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Thomas Fessler. I'm a ufologist and ancient alien theorist advocating for disclosure, practicing remote viewing, non-local consciousness, and vibratory spirituality. I also dabble in plasma cosmology, and it's great to be here, Tim. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Rowe.
Greetings. My name is Ted Rowe. I'm the current director of research at NARCAP, National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena. I've been studying aviation cases involving UAP for the last 20 years, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Rowe. Okay, Thomas.
Yes.
Go ahead.
All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our interview with Ted Rowe. I just want to introduce you and give you some insight into Ted and some of his accomplishments throughout the years. He's as tonight moves on, you'll find out he's truly an amazing person. Ted Rowe is an originally founding member and executive director of NARCAP.org. That stands for the National Aeronautic, NARCAP.org. Since 1999, is currently the director of research. He spent the last 20 years administrating for the organization and documenting and analyzing aviation safety-related cases that may involve unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAP. NARCAP has conducted studies on well-known cases like the 2006 O'Hare Airport case and published studies addressing different aspects of UAP like flight dynamics. He has published or helped to publish over 45 papers on various aspects relating to aviation and UAP. In addition to supporting NARCAP.org research and initiatives, Ted is involved in other aspects of UAP research, including so-called hotspots, such as the one when we talked about Steve Brown in Las Vegas last week. Ted is also an advocating multidisciplinary approach to UAP and UFO phenomena. He has recently established a multidisciplinary, independent research journal to offer diverse researchers the opportunity for independent, peer-reviewed and publication, something that has not existed today until now. Ted teaches freediving, martial arts, and meditation. He lives between two off-grid sites in Hawaii and Alaska, where he spends most of his time researching, writing, and rescuing stray dogs. Ted, welcome to UFO Man. It's great to have you here.
My pleasure, Thomas. Great to be here.
Awesome. Welcome. Could you give us an interview of RCAP and some insight into your latest processes?
Well, sure. NARCAP was founded in 1999 after I met Dr. Richard Haynes, and he had this idea for a pilot reporting center for unidentified aerial phenomena, and we kicked it around, and I ended up taking the helm on the administrative side, and he took the science wing, and together we ran NARCAP for 15 years until he retired in 2015. Our process has been to document and analyze cases that it might involve unidentified aerial phenomena in aircraft. And we deal with military pilots, commercial pilots, private pilots. Let's see. We currently published recently we published a pilot advisory, which I think is really important that your audience should know about this. And it's basically a document that informs pilots and aviation professionals on what to expect in an encounter with unidentified aerial phenomena. And that's based on our 20 years of studying the situation.
Well, that's awesome. What are some of NARCAP's most notable achievements?
Well, we've done a lot of things behind the scene. The term UAP that everybody is throwing around, Dr. Haynes defined that term in 1980. And then when we founded NARCAP in 1999, we decided to promote it instead of using the common term UFO. We felt it was more accurate and it didn't carry a pejorative. It was more objective as well. And so we started we introduced that term in our definition of it in 1999, and at the time it wasn't in common use. And now, of course, everybody's using the term UAP, and our focus on aviation safety. So that's I would say that as a primary accomplishment, that would be towards the top. We've done other things. We briefed the FAA's ASRS analysts some years ago. We did. We had the first research agreement with an international government research team with the government of Chile. We did that in 2010. We've done a lot of other things too. We participated in a congressional hearing on UAP that had some very interesting twists and turns in it. So we've got a lot of things that we've done. Most of it behind the scenes. Most of it we haven't really talked about.
If I may, Ted, would you say that in your experience, since you've had so many decades of doing this and being involved in this phenomenon, would you say that the aviation industry as a whole is becoming more or less, let's say, comfortable with coming forward with some of the things that they're seeing out there?
Well, that's a good question. What we see out there is institutional bias. So in some companies, pilots don't want to step forward and talk about it. Others, they're fine with it. And certain individuals seem to be more willing to talk about it than others. There's been an upswing in all of this over the last few years as the media presence is increasing, as the conversation around UAP increases in the media. We're getting more pilot cases and we're seeing more activity. And I think they're getting a little more comfortable with trying to talk about it, or at least contacting us to talk about it.
Outstanding. Good.
What
Awesome.
I was wondering is, with the frequency that we're seeing lately of spherical type vehicles that kind of represent the old fashioned sightings of Foo Fighters, are they becoming a threat to aviation?
Yeah. Well, NARCAP did a study called Project Sphere, and where we analyzed specifically aviation cases involving spherical UAP, and we learned quite a lot from that. It was a collaborative effort of about a dozen of us, and we all wrote papers of various aspects. Now, I wrote the paper on U.S. cases involving spherical UAP, and so what I did was I analyzed 100 aviation safety related incidents involving UAP for those that presented as spherical lights or objects. And out of that 100, I found 44 that did. And then I broke it down from there in terms of the kinds of incidents and the kinds of circumstances. And they all involve safety factors like loss of separation, collision headings, near mid-air collisions, night blindness in one incident, concurrent electromagnetic failures of electronic systems aboard the aircraft during the sighting. Now, the interesting thing with that is that in every incident, it involved a UAP that presented as a ball of light. All of the incidents we have that show concurrent failures of electrical systems involve balls of light, not the other profiles of UAP like discs or spheres or cylinders and so on.
Well, let me ask you this, sir. Have you ever seen any evidence of a direct collision or brush or anything like that with an aircraft?
I've heard claims by air crews of impacts and bent metal, and I've seen some newspaper clippings thereof over time. If there was actually a catastrophic incident, we might never know about it. UAP are intermittently detected on radar, and the survivability of air crews in catastrophes is fairly low. And for example, if you take a look at one of our studies, NARCAP Technical Report 12, it's an incident involving a ball of light that was photographed by a group of astronomers on the ground as an airliner was coming into land at San Jose. And the ball of light was following the airliner. At no time was the air crew aware that it was there. The guys on the ground took a whole string of pictures of it, which we did an analysis of, but the air crew never knew that was there. So
interesting.
There's variations on that question in terms of resolving it. My guess is that there probably have been incidents. There are situations where air crews have inputted inputted movements to avoid UAP that could be dangerous on their own. I know of one situation where they tried to avoid one, and passengers and hosts were unprepared and got bounced around in the cockpit, and got bounced around in the cabin, and there were injuries related to that. That was a flight out of Tokyo some years ago.
Actually, evasive action to avoid one. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Are they doing evasive action because they think they need to get out of the way of it? Because
yes,
the UAP is going to get out of the way. It's just a matter of we're just overreacting to it.
Yeah, but I don't know if I want to bet my life on that.
Exactly. First off, that particularly with these balls of light, we don't know that they're masking an object, and we don't know that they're technology. And in fact, they could very well be some natural plasma form, or there could be a natural plasma form that looks like them. Right. There's been some argument about what they call super ball lightning, which has like a billion joules of energy in it. It could vaporize an aircraft if it hit it. Right.
Wow.
And so I was always very conservative when we had these conversations inside of NARCAP in terms of advising air crews what they ought to do. I always say, just go away from it. Don't go anywhere near it. Don't follow it, and don't assume that it's going to get out of your way. I just did a case here, a year or so ago over Mexico. I did an analysis of a freight hauler heading northbound from Corentero Airport, north of Mexico City. He's cruising at 37,000 feet. They're northbound over Tamaulipas, a little south of Monterrey. And a ball of light witnessed by the co-pilot drops down to their level, and then it flared up, and they thought it was coming right at them. So they both prepared to put in control inputs to evade this thing. And then it changed its heading and proceeded to pace them. So it suddenly was no longer on a collision heading, but it just held that position and then paced next to the aircraft.
Wow.
Those are the kind of situations that we're looking at with ball of light phenomena, and their unpredictability, and perhaps the need to put in control inputs to avoid them.
Yeah,
right.
And that raises a whole other safety issue.
Are a lot of the planes having issues like with electrical systems or anything, or is that more restricted just to military?
Well, that's an interesting question, and of course our data on military cases is kind of sparse. And plus, a lot of military aircraft are shielded. But we do have some cases that are signals data. And in fact, the AIAA, the American Institute for Aeronautics and Astronautics, one of their sample cases from back in the early 70s involved a signals case. It involved an Air Force EM aircraft encountering a UAP and detecting signals coming off of it, which I thought was pretty interesting. But military aircraft are shielded, commercial aircraft are not. And so, we need more data to really answer that question. The commercial aircraft do have problems with these things from time to time, but generally speaking, finding those EM cases is kind of uncommon. We don't get a lot of those. We have 58 of them, I think, in our data file of thousands of cases.
Would you say the bulk of your information is coming from commercial flights rather than military?
Yeah, well, compared to military, yeah, we get more commercial than military. Now we do get military, and then we get private. It would probably be commercial, private, military in that order as far as how many we get by ratio. I get a couple of military cases a year, more commercial cases a year, and that's keeping in mind that the cases come to me. I don't know what they are. I don't know if they're UAP or not until we come to a resolution on the other end of examining them, if it's possible. So not all cases I get are UAP cases. I had a case, a Serbian pilot flying southbound from France into Spain, and they were flying a 737-800. They were at 38,000 feet, doing 500 miles an hour. And they were looking downrange to the southeast or southwest, and they saw a contrail and they saw a flash And then the contrail proceeded towards them. And then the co-pilot gets his video on, and you can see the captain, you can hear him swearing in Serbian, white knuckling it. You can see the reflection of his hands in the control yoke in the windscreen of the aircraft with the UAP up behind it, right? Well, it turned out that was a Falcon 9 booster, and that UAP was actually miles above them, but it was still bright enough to shine light into their aircraft, and it was still intimidating enough that they were so unfamiliar with it, that it created a safety-related incident. So, but it took us a while to dig into that to get that answer.
So, looking back, what was it like to work with Dr. Richard Haynes?
Oh, he was a good mentor. They all were. At the time, we had Haynes, we had Dr. Lee, we had Dr. Heisch, we had some NASA engineers, and a lot of aviation experts on board. We've changed the format, the way we run the organization now. That was the way we were running at that time. So we had about 55 people on call to help us with pretty much anything we needed. But working with Dr. Haynes was very interesting. I learned a lot about objectivity. I learned a lot about some of the problems of science, what it's facing in terms of dealing with the UAP subject, because I came to it as an experiencer first, who was curious about what had happened to him. And then I ended up within months of a crazy sighting, ended up being the executive director of a dream team of UFO researchers. And it was a vertical learning curve. Everything I did, I had to learn something new. It was constant. And I was learning how to manage the media, trying to introduce this new term, UAP, and trying to hold to that and trying to educate people on it to get them to use it and understand why we were using it. All of these things were all part of working with these guys, and it was great. I learned quite a lot. I also learned that there were some limitations in all of this. Learned a little bit about weaknesses and how people's weaknesses can affect the outcomes of things, and how important it is to stay on message and keep yourself out of the way as best you can. I learned a lot from those guys. I owe Dr. Haynes quite a bit for even allowing me to work with his organization for as long as I did. So.
Well, thank you for telling us that. Thomas, do you want to ask the next question, please? Sure,
yeah. We're kind of going in a good direction, but before we leave our stuff talking about NARCAP and kind of where it's been 20 plus years since you started it. Where do you see it going in the next 20?
Well, we've got some traction at this point, and we're going to continue pushing. There's a couple of things that would make NARCAP obsolete fairly quickly, and that would be if the FAA would start accepting UFO reports from pilots and processing them. If they did that, that would pretty much take away most of our reason for existence. We'd have to go global at that point in order to kind of move the message into the larger aviation community, particularly the UN ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. So there's still work to do in advocacy and so on, but I wouldn't imagine that it would be a focus on case analysis as much as it would be on advocacy.
Yeah, you mean the FAA doesn't allow it?
They don't. Wow. Don't accept pilot reports of UFO anything.
Yeah.
And they tell you right in the aeronautic instruction manual that if you want to report a UFO, you can contact private civilian reporting firms.
Yeah.
But they won't take the report, and they won't study it. If it shows up at the ASRS group, we might see it. But
the FAA doesn't even so much as have a form for it, is what we're saying, right?
That's exactly what we're saying.
I mean, that's incredible.
And it's been that way for a long time. For the whole time I've been in it, it was one of my major pushes to change that throughout my whole time with NARCAP. But I wanted to change it to put NARCAP in there instead of the FAA. I want that data.
Right.
But bottom line is the right way to handle this is to get the FAA to process this stuff the way they should, allow the data to move, and then you can resolve what this is. And if it's all nonsense, you'll be able to figure that out. But basic as it is right now, if they don't even take the data, then what?
Right.
Right.
So that's been our job and our message and mission for some time now.
What's frustrating with that is being that everyone is so excited about the 180-day UAPTF report that they're ignoring the fact that the FAA doesn't accept any information. Why that is like a roadblock in the release of anything that they would really want to disclose, because that's an organization then, or an agency that isn't working with the other agencies.
Yeah, it sounds irresponsible. Sorry, Tommy, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to me, it's appalling that they don't even have a form for this, because I would think that they would want to know about anything anomalous in a flight path or near an aircraft of any kind, for anything, whether it's a flying saucer, classic flying saucer, or whether it's Pinocchio, whatever. I would think that they would have some sort of form or way to report that, for the pilot to be able to report that. I would think they'd want to know that. I mean, it's almost like,
Our aviation system is the best in the world. It's the safest in the world. We haven't had a fatal commercial accident since 2009. Okay, and the reason is that we're very careful with everything. And now, after taking care of all the problems like wings falling off airplanes and stuff, they got all that down, and now they're down into the lower frequency of occurrence events. And these are low frequency of occurrence events, but they do happen, and they do involve safety factors. The institutional bias, I believe, is administrative. Because the people on the ground are sympathetic. I talk to pilots, I talk to managers, I talk to various folks, and as long as their reputation isn't hung up on it, they're able to talk to you about it and want to. But if you speak to like a union rep, Leslie Keene interviewed one famously some years ago, and the guy said, if this was happening, don't you think I'd know about it? So there's a whole psychological block to all of this, and I do believe it's institutional bias in some form that's holding it up for the FAA. Now, if the UAP task force is serious about all of this, they will mandate data collection across the bureaucracy.
Right.
So all of the military services, all of the FAA and aviation related everything, all of that will start moving data towards a centralized point. Kind of like the French do with their program through their space agency, GPAN, CNES GPAN. We've done some work with and around them over the years, but their whole purpose is not to lose data, and that's the attitude we need to have. And if these things are all psychological aberrations, then it's going to come out in the data, and if they're not, then that's going to come out in the data. And what we need to do is not roadblock the data. We need it in order to make decisions about it.
Talk about a story that's primed for Tucker Carlson to cover this, because he's about one of the few news people out there that covers this kind of stuff. Yep. But this really does expose a major safety issue and a major factor of their limiting communication on this amongst pilots to give other pilots the insight on what everyone else is dealing with. It's like they're making pilot blinders.
Well, you want to be a little bit careful about that, because you have a lot of different players in the aviation community. And let's face it, the margins per seat are pretty slim, to run an airline. It's not like, so they make conservative decisions about the things they'll talk about. For example, the institutional bias at United is one, they will never talk about this. And anybody in their air crews that talk about it could end up with a psych evaluation to lose their flight status. You want to be really careful about what you say with the guy in the seat next to you. Who that is, and I always tell that to my reporters. I don't want them gushing, just tell us what happened. So on one hand, that's the way it is at United, but you go to another regional carrier and they're willing to take our pilot survey and put it in the ready room in all the mailboxes.
Nice.
And then we get 28% response rate, because all the pilots have to fold it up, put it in an envelope, and send it back, and we end up with a ridiculous response rate and a little window into how reality is. Their company didn't punish them for thinking about it. So that tells me there's no mandate across the industry, right? These are purely decisions that are being made within the culture of that particular company,
right?
And I think the same kind of problem exists in our government with sort of institutionalizing the Robertson panel and creating an institutional bias across our government that turns around and consumes itself and doesn't allow it to look at these things because it's already declared them verboten, right? It's
Right,
already
like the Condon report.
Exactly. That was enough. If you're going to talk about it in the government side, that's what they'll talk about. You know, they will talk about the conclusion of the Blue Book project. That's it. You know, and they won't engage further than that. But that's because of an institutional bias that's been embedded in government since 1953. You follow what I'm saying? So it's kind of self-fulfilling, and it isn't necessarily draconian. It's just, you know, if we trained everybody to think UFOs are crazy and then we recruit them into government, how's government going to treat UFOs?
That's crazy.
Like, yeah. So there's you want to be a little careful about just saying that, you know, the men in black aren't letting us know what we need to know. I mean, after watching how this COVID situation was managed from day one, after looking at a lot of these other circumstances and that our government has done, my confidence in them to manage something like this isn't particularly high, you know. And that's not an insult, really. It's just, hey, we're human beings and we don't do things really well as a group. A lot
Ted,
of the time.
I'm sure you're preaching to the choir on that one.
I actually believe that people are expecting too much out of the 180-day report.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, the government has never wanted to release the information, and to issue them a 180-day ultimatum to say, hey, we need all the information you have, everything that you got in 180 days. I think that's impossible to achieve.
Well, and I'm not really sure what the end game is of that as well, because they're going to call it national security issue, and that's the end of the conversation.
Yep.
You know, whatever it is they think they know is going on there, they are not going to make it for public consumption.
Right.
They may tell you that top men are working on this, and that's going to be all you're going to get out of it, as far as I can guess.
We actually have a question from our chat room there, Ted. And the question is from Bob Gray. Dear Mr. Rowe, have you ever met Stanton Freeman?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I met Stan. He and I were on a panel at the 2017 UFO Congress. I've had a cordial relationship with Stan for years. Yeah, before he passed, of course.
It's sad that he's gone. He was actually an anonymous subscriber to this channel.
Oh, really?
I know this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was just you know, Stan was a neat guy. He's a very interesting man and very passionate about his work. I remember I was standing backstage getting ready for this panel, and he wanted to find out if I was going to be. I was an unknown to him. I mean, we'd had conversations, sort of, you know, email, but he wanted to make sure how I felt about certain things before we went out there, because we needed to know whether we were going to be adversarial or not, and we weren't. You know, he and I were simpatico on many levels.
They have a very tasteful memorial to him in the Roswell Museum. I thought it was very nicely done.
Nice. Yeah, that was very interesting. And, he died coming home from a conference, and doing what he always does, which is research and educate and try and make things a little better around this subject.
Okay, Thomas, you got a question?
Yeah, of course. You kind of alluded in your conversations earlier that you've had some personal involvement with UFOs. Do you want to touch on that? Maybe kind of tell us about what kind of initially brought you there. That would be kind of cool.
Like your grandparents.
Well, sure. Let me preface this a little bit, because there was a time when you could lose credibility by talking about these things,
right?
And working with the aviation community and working with professionals and officials, I tended to play it down. I shared it with my colleagues a little bit to let them know that it wasn't new to me. And I use it a lot in my research in terms of just comparing things that I'm experienced versus what's being reported, and see if it rings true or not. But that having been said, I wouldn't be involved in any of this if I hadn't had experience, and if I hadn't reported it to NASA Ames Research and then had Dr. Haynes come talk to me about it. So But it started when I was a kid. I was 5 years old, riding with my grandparents in their car. 1965. I was on the Cadott Pass on the Lincoln Grade, heading towards Lincoln, Montana, and our car was intercepted by a disc, kind of like the Zanesville disc. If you look at the photograph from Zanesville, Ohio, very similar kind of thing. And it confronted us from in front. I can still remember it framed in the windshield of our Buick, and made everybody in the car quite frightened. The energy, and I'd never felt my relatives absolutely terrified. It was a feeling of it just kind of washed over me. I'd never been in the presence of terror. I was a little kid, and all of a sudden everybody that I loved and everybody that I was attached to was suddenly in this place that I'd never seen them before. And that was really sobering for me. And it made an impression that went with other experiences I had, both with UFOs and not with UFOs growing up, created problems later. But that was my first exposure. And then the one that got me involved with NARCAP was in January of 1999. And I was riding with some friends southbound on 880 in Oakland, California. We just crossed the Bay Bridge interchange to continue heading south towards Oakland. And I looked out over MacArthur area of town and saw a yellow and white light stacked on top of each other, a yellow light and a white light, And as I was looking, I said, no, that's unusual. I had to look around Susan. She was driving. I was in the passenger seat. My friend Ian was in the back seat. And I looked around and I pointed and I said, no, that's unusual, because I talked about UFOs before in my life. And I was a layman. I wasn't involved in ufology. I wasn't anywhere near ufology. And then as I looked at it, the light turned and it became a rectangle with two white lights underneath it.
Wow.
Kind of spaced a quarter of the way in on each end. And then it proceeded to move down the Highway 24 towards the Highway 24 interchange with 880 as we were heading south. So it was an intercept pattern. And and this was miles away. It was a couple of miles away at the time when we first saw it. And then as we were heading south, we were about a mile from it and facing it. And it was between us and the Oakland Federal buildings. And then it just jumped and came to a dead stop right in front of our car. It was transparent on one side. You could see the entire interior. You could see the crew. You could see the deck. And it just immediately matched our speed down the road. And we were doing 55. And then in the space of, go ahead.
What did the crew look like?
Oh, you wouldn't mistake them for humans, but kind of the typical light bulb shaped head, sort of tubular body. They didn't have broad shoulders. It was like their shoulders and hips were kind of the same width. They were long between the shoulder and the elbow and between the hip and the knee, kind of a bow-legged kind of look to them. They weren't particularly big. I'm guessing under 5 feet. And they were backlit. The whole interior of the thing was lit up yellow, and the light was coming behind them. So, and they had their hands on a panel, and they were all three arrayed. The thing was broadside to us, right? And it spanned most of 4 lanes of freeways. It was probably 10, 12 feet thick, and I'm guessing 45, 50 feet long. So yeah, that's the crew anyway.
Wow, cool. We don't hear much about the crew or the pilots.
Yeah. How are they piloting it?
Well, they had both. They all had their hands on a panel poking out of the wall that was between us and them, and there was a heads-up display. And the one on my right had his right hand up and was banging away on this heads-up display, and I could see patterns or symbols or something on the display in colors. There was like red and green, really kind of bright watermelon red colors and so on. He tapping away. He had kind of a weird posture. He had sort of elbow in, his hand was up and tapping away. It wasn't like, it was like this. Maybe that's something to do with the body shape. I don't know, but yeah, they all had their hands on the machine during the whole time I could see them. So I'm assuming biointegration, some kind.
Tommy, what do you think?
Very interesting. One of the folks in the chat also asked a question: did it make any sound at all?
No, we were in our car, and it was less than its own length from our windshield, but we couldn't hear it. There was a point when Susan, she was driving, and she says, "Ted, are those?" Meaning, Ted, are those aliens, right? And I kind of blurted out, "No," and started to slide kind of down in my seat a little bit because I really didn't want to be there. And the one in the middle cocked his head at me, like, "Oh, really?" With a very human kind of gesture. It had an energy that I don't know if I'm correct in my interpretation of it, but I thought he heard me, and that just made me even more uncomfortable. And then the device, as we were heading down the road, we were moving forward. This thing's in front of us. It moved to the side of the car, and they were right outside the window on my side, on the passenger side. And then the thing closed up close to the vehicle. We were up on a raised freeway, right? So we were about 50, 60 feet off the ground, right? And then it closed up to outside of the guardrail of where this thing was. So we were in the outside lane. So we weren't far from it, maybe 10, 15 feet. And then at that point, all of a sudden, the environment started changing. It was 4:30 in the afternoon about, and then all of a sudden it got dark. And about 90 seconds passed. We passed the Oakland police station, so it was maybe a mile from where the interception happened. We got about to the Oakland police station. I kind of shook it off, and I asked Susan what time it was, and she said 7:34. So over 3 hours had passed in that 90-second space. The assumption is just that the device got close to us. My consciousness wasn't interrupted. It was disorienting, but I wasn't like unconscious. There wasn't a stretch where I don't remember anything. I just remember being disoriented, but in the car. So I don't know if anything happened or not. The vehicle stayed with us. About at 7:34, it was back in front of the car. We passed the Oakland police station. It was just clearing the tops of the freeway signs, the tall freeway signs, give the street names and everything. We went by Jackson Street, right? And we're heading down towards Oak Street. And then it does this maneuver. I roll the window down and look up, and I can see between the lights and see the bottom of the thing. And then it gets behind the car and turns this way, and then proceeds to head out over Lake Merritt and then up into the Oakland Hills, and it was gone.
Wow.
The same side stayed facing us through the whole incident. From the time that it turned, when we first saw it over MacArthur and it turned broadside, that side stayed facing us through the whole maneuver, with them looking out at us. So,
wow.
Go figure.
One of the people in the chat asked if, I think it was NENNINE1, she said, do you think they knew it was you?
Yeah. Yeah, that was an intentional interception. I've got several of them in my life. I've got experiences that don't have anything to do with me, where I was just there in the right place at the right time and it flew by. Somebody told me to be there and I would see it happen, but it didn't have anything to do with me. So there are different types of ways you can encounter this, but I've had these personal kind of close approaches, a number of them in my life. And I don't have an explanation for it. I don't have a message other than I don't think it should be happening, and we should be vigilant. And we need to learn a heck of a lot more than we know already, so we can figure out whether this is a good thing or not.
Yeah.
And what to do about it.
The only way we can get there is through the sharing of information and for bringing all of us together, because if we all just, take our own little stuff and keep it together and don't come together as a planet to go ahead and basically ally ourselves together as the humans, because that way we have a more coordinated effort. And it's going to take a lot for world governments to get there, but I saw it 40, 50 years ago, and we need to get there and soon.
Well, that movie Mars Attacks, did you guys ever watch that with Jack Nicholson and everything? Yeah. It's funny, but that's exactly the problem, where we can't agree on a response and do it quickly enough to confront an actual threat.
Yeah.
And that's probably the reason why the military and the intelligence community are loath to talk about it, because they it's bad enough trying to decide what to do and to manage it in a tactical way. But then to bring in the aliens are our good buddies group and the aliens are demons group and all these other folks and have them weigh in on it when really it's purely a tactical issue of, hey, they're inside the wire laying hands on people and they're not, and they're capable of talking to us and they're not. Okay.
Right.
So this is aggression. And we have considerations because we don't know what their supply line's like or how many of them we have to kill to get them to stop coming here. So we have to play it close to our chest. And I would bet you that if the military is playing heads up ball, that's the ball they're playing. And that's why the UAP task force isn't going to take us very far. And that's why those people like me and others, and there are many others who have stories like mine and even more out there stuff, we have to continue pushing on. I personally feel that all UAP data should be open source, but we can't even do that inside of ufology. The problem getting even our fellow researchers to share their data is really difficult. And actual science standards in open science require data sharing so that you can replicate the data and prove whether they're telling you the truth or not, whether the findings are accurate or not. And like if you go to the American Association for the Advancement of Science, they maintain public databases where if you submit a paper, you submit all your data to that database that goes along with that paper. Then they peer review and then they publish and the material moves. And really that ufology isn't doing that, and it needs to. UAP data that may reflect ET incursions is every bit as important as epidemic data. As a country, you don't have that's pretty good. As a country, you don't have a right to keep that epidemic data to yourself. And I think the same thing's true with UAP data, So open source, we need independent publishing. I've set up a journal to try and address that. And we're working on being a signatory right now to the Open Science Foundation transparency and openness and publication requirements so that we can start moving academic journal level writing around this topic. And there's thousands and thousands of theses around it, that could be explored, So
Yeah.
That's what has to happen. If we really want to make a change here, that's how we change it.
The world is a big place, and it's hopefully this is a big enough thing to try and bring everyone together versus just having independent factions like Russia and China teaming up, and then the U.S. with people in South America and possibly in Europe and stuff trying to bring it together. But it really just comes into everybody bringing it together, because this is not a local problem. This is a global problem that goes well beyond anything we've dealt with in the past.
Everybody's going to have to show their cards at the same time in order to make this thing move. I mean, that's just the bottom line.
That's right.
Yeah.
We also have a lot of ufologists that are the rock star ufologists out there saying that all aliens are benevolent. Where I've always believed there's a duality that in the universe that, there's always good and bad. There's going to be benevolent and hostile. It's just we haven't figured out who they are, where they're coming from, and what their agenda is.
Somebody's always going to want something somebody else has, and that's even at a species level,
Well, and this is the thing. If they're out there, then we're part of an ecosystem, and there are different players in that ecosystem. We have to be very careful about anthropic thinking and projecting ourselves on things that are not like us at all, offering excuses for their behavior, like, oh, they're snatching people in the night and everything, but hey, maybe it's this and maybe it's that. Well, no, maybe it's assault and maybe it needs to stop. And if you can't stop it, then it's not a good thing.
Right.
And I would never stand on a podium and tell 8 billion people that an ET incursion is a good thing. It's wonderful. It's inspiring. It's great to know that there's life out there and all this stuff, but don't lose your head. Look carefully at what's happening here. These are extinction level events. If they're not managed well and they're not understood well, even if they're benevolent, we could kill ourselves over the darn things.
Sure.
Right.
And I can think of a dozen scenarios how that would happen, So the the issue with all of this is we have to get out of the kindergarten perspective on all of this. We start understanding that we have nowhere to go. We have to be very conservative about the decisions we make on this. And if there's a presence that's intelligent and communicating, capable of communication, and it's not communicating, then we really need to bear down on that.
Yeah, I gotta say this, Ted. In regards to one scenario, with UFOs or UAPs appearing over nuclear silos, like in North Dakota and South Dakota and whatnot, if they can shut off missiles, who's to say they can't launch them?
Well, that's the whole thing. They could create a war as easily as prevent one, and who's to say why they shut them off?
Right.
You know, the message might have been, hey, we're here and we want you to know that you can't use these against us.
Right.
Right.
You know, it may not have anything to do with us using them against each other and being our benevolent overlords.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
it may be just a straight up warning. If that's the best you got, you don't have it, don't try it.
Or
you
they
know?
could be, this is our planet. We're not going to let you blow it up.
Well, it could be that too. So again, it's not benign; it's just domination, and there's a lot of different things to consider here, and that's why we need really good minds weighing in on as many different aspects of ET incursions, on group psychology, on all kinds of get as much of a conversation going about all of this stuff as we can, so that if somebody's actually faced with some decisions around all of this, that there's something to fall back on, that there's a resource to go look at, that isn't just an archive of all of ufology. It's vetted conversations by people that are familiar with the material and are intelligent and are bringing their professional or educational background to bear on different aspects of this subject. We need that. We need it badly. If we're going to actually engage this thing, this public domain discussion that takes place on here on YouTube and in social media is not what needs to happen here.
Yeah, it needs to go well beyond that. But I have to say, you have probably the most unique and agreeable perspective that really hits at home with about this phenomenon and how we really need to look at it for what it is or what it could be. Because you never know, and you always have to plan for the unexpected.
Well, you were talking earlier about the heroes on the podiums, right? And you know, their perspective on all of this. I mentioned one temporal effect. There's several types of temporal effects that get reported by UAP witnesses, and they aren't all just accelerated time like what I had. And it kind of implies that they don't live in our timeline. So 100 years passing here may not be 100 years for them. We think 100 years have passed and they haven't done anything, therefore it must be all good. But only 25 years have passed for them. And maybe they live 1,000 years instead of 73, you know? So whistling past the graveyard, offering platitudes, you know, it's that doesn't answer this. What answers this is turning a laser eye on the subject and taking it apart and understanding it, truly understanding it. This one, not what you hope it is, not the what it might inspire you to think about the universe. You know, I mean, I think it's wonderful personally. And there was a time when I really thought I was special, but insight and awareness trained me to back up and take a closer look at what was going on. And I had to change everything about my perspective. That's the problem with these things. They're so antiseptic and so sterile that when the incident occurs, you can project anything you want on it. And if you're somebody in need of meaning in your life, a purpose, you may suddenly think, there's my purpose, there's my meaning. And all of a sudden, now the aliens are good guys and you're their spokesman and you've got all this and that going on and you confabulated this whole thing because they paid attention to you.
It's just like the phenomenon, the entire subject, really. It's got to be viewed with an objective eye. And that's the rub, isn't it? I mean, those of us that actually have experiences, I mean, we have a pretty good idea and understanding there's something definitely next level happening here.
Yes.
There's no question about that. But I mean, most people, and especially we're talking about media and even the government, they're not looking at this with an objective, you know, unbiased eye. They're looking at this like the government. They want to ignore it. They want to pretend it's not happening. And then you've got the media out there that when people do report it, a lot of them are considered to be crackpots, and they're basically ridiculed publicly, for coming forward with their sighting. So it's just, it's a very fine line, and it's very hard to find people that are balanced well enough. Like to be honest, this channel, we'll call out a bad video when we see one. We do our analysis and that kind of thing. And unfortunately, not enough people are doing that.
Well, it's true all across the board. I mean, I publish these papers all the time, and I get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of visits to the page that the paper's on, and they're there for not long enough to read the paper. And I'll talk to experts in this field and in other fields. Hey, did you read this? Oh, yeah. Well, they didn't read it. I'll start digging in and realize, hey, I'm going to embarrass this guy. He didn't read it. And we have a whole culture of this that they need it in a soundbite in a second and a half, and this subject doesn't work like that. And real critical thinking doesn't work like that. The ability to fact check your beliefs. Mm-hmm. Not everybody has that awareness. They're in their beliefs. They're being their beliefs.
They take that leap of faith.
Yeah, and so and I did it. I've been there. I know what that's like. But as you train your awareness, you start seeing what your emotions do. And then you start seeing their roots and how they satisfy themselves. And then you grow up.
Right. I think, though, a lot of people still have a lot of growing up to do. Mm-hmm. What the heck here? I lost my page. Hold on a minute. Can you see our page?
I can see you.
We're still up, yeah.
I can see you.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well, Ted, again, it's very, very interesting. I tell you, you're an incredibly interesting guest, and we really appreciate, everything, your insights and everything, for you coming on the show for us. It's been fantastic. I know there's a million other questions I'll think of as soon as the show is over. So if it's okay, if I could maybe, contact you directly, that'd be lovely.
Anytime. Anybody who wants to talk to me, I'm available. I try to be available. I've spent a lot of time working on image around this stuff. I've spent a lot of time working around government on this, and with pilots and with scientists and all of that. And I'm an experiencer. And so all of that together gives me a unique perspective. And if anybody wants to pick my brains, I try to be available for it. So reach out anytime.
We really appreciate that.
Speaking of picking your brains, since moving to Hawaii, what have you learned from the locals about UFOs around the islands and potentially experienced yourself?
Well, that's a good question. There's a tradition here, particularly around ball of light phenomena, different kinds. They refer to as the night marchers, and there's strings of blue lights seen moving through the jungle down in Kalapana and other places. We have spherical balls of light moving around on the lava fields. Some of this we suspect might be volcanic. And then there are other things. I friended a Hawaiian priestess, a kumu named Haleaka Iolani Puli, is her name. Mm-hmm. Her family kept the temple at Kealakekua Bay, where Captain Cook was killed and dismembered. And it's a big platform temple. It's 150 feet long and 20 feet high or so. In Aka, we were friends, and she came to me one day. She'd done some research because I was training to be a Pahuna, and she came to me and she says, "Brada, I hear you a UFO guy." And I said, "I dabble." And she says, "Brada, the UFOs, they come out of the water right over there, and they come in and they hover over the Pali and they collect the mana, and then they go Mauka up the mountain and they disappear in the Keopuka up by Choice Mark." And I thought, well, I'd heard that story before. People that live there at Napoopoo in that area, Captain Cook had told me that they'd seen UFOs in the bay, both underwater and above it. And I had seen a couple of things that I thought were a little odd, and I kind of had me watching, but I didn't really suspect it was a hot spot. I teach martial arts. I teach Japanese sword, which goes with Zen Buddhist meditation, which is an offshoot of the mindfulness training that I underwent that changed my perspective on my experiences. Okay. One of my students, a sword student, was staying in a place above Kealakekua Bay, and he got a video, about 20 seconds, of a ball of light going across below him, going across the bay. And I thought, geez, that's pretty interesting. And then I'm sitting out at the temple one night about 2 o'clock in the morning. I just finished a sword set. I train at night a lot. And I look out and I see an orange ball of light come out of the water right about where Akka had pointed. And then it started moving towards me. And as it came into view, I realized it was a ceramic white flying disc inside of an orange ball of light, a very defined orange ball of light. And it traversed up on, when it got to the beach next to the cliff, they buried all kinds of sorcerers and priests in that cliff. And that temple that I was at was the third temple. There had been temples there going back 1,000 years. That was the third temple built there in the late 1700s. So I'm sitting there and the thing comes across, it crosses over the beach, and then all of a sudden it just flares up into a blob of light, just a blob. You couldn't tell that there was an object in it anymore. And then it headed right up the ravine, up over the rim to Keapuka Heights near Choice Mart.
Wow.
Just as Akka had said.
Yeah.
Now, with my training as a Pahuna, I underwent an initiation and a couple of things. So I could walk around in the village and get hugged by giant brown men calling me uncle, right? I was part of that environment there. I had friends that lived there, and Akka lived there. And so I started asking around, and yeah, they started talking to me. And a couple of the Kumu told me, they said, we didn't have this problem before the white men came. So, which is similar to what I had heard from Aboriginal people in Eastern Australia, who told me that they didn't have a name for these things, and they were just as puzzled by them as we were, which is very different than, aliens in the rock art kind of perspective, but that's what they told me, Again, if you go out and you actually ask these questions, my compulsivity drives me to go and see these places and be there in case something happens. And for 15 seconds in Kealakekua Bay, I was in the right place and it happened. And that's the second hotspot where I was told that things happened, and then I went there and experienced things that were anomalous, unquestionably anomalous. So there you go.
That's very awesome. I had an experience where I saw 50 feet away, 500 foot in the air, 6 rectangular objects with rounded corners, and it looked like they were on fire, and this was in broad daylight. And no sound. We tried to film them with our cell phone cameras. We could see them on the viewfinder, but when we recorded, it did not come out on film.
Huh. That's interesting. It was visual, but you couldn't record it.
Right.
Because
exactly.
I've seen the reverse. I've seen things that are in near infrared that show up because of the camera sensor is wide enough bandwidth wise to sense a little bit of what your eye can't see. But that's interesting that you've got something you could see, but you couldn't capture.
Right. You could see it. Yeah, you could see it on the lens finder, but you could not get it to record. Yeah. The same lights appeared 2 days later in a city about 20 miles south of where I lived. And a guy with an old Sony video camera, with the tapes that go on the side, he caught it on film. And it made the news, but the digital format couldn't capture it.
Wow.
Well, there's some lessons in all of that, in terms of tech and how we record and document these things, for sure. And I think we need to look more at that, because there probably are some issues around all of that we haven't considered. But particularly the non-visible spectrum. There's things happening there and we're not seeing it and we assume that because we don't see it, it isn't there. And these things skirt our perceptions. And people are just turning on to that now, just about how good they are at doing that. I don't think they're particularly magical, but I think their tech is really good. And they understand us really well as far as our brains and our psychology goes. So they got no excuse to be messing with us, knowing what they know about us already.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So anyway,
they've been experimenting on us for years.
It would seem so.
if not decades, even longer than that, maybe generations.
Yeah, forever.
Yeah,
maybe 10,000
I would
years.
imagine
Day
that's
one.
probably correct. You know, our pilot case files start in 1916,
Well,
and the descriptions are just the same profiles that pilots describe right up till today. I put a tweet out on Twitter, a DH-4 in 1926, a mail plane that encountered a giant cylindrical object that was wingless and forced it to land. He had to land the plane. He just couldn't stay up there with it.
Right.
And then in 1985, David Hastings is flying over Nevada and he almost hits a giant cylinder that didn't have any wings, and he flies around and takes a picture of it. And this is pre-Photoshop, so we have this wonderful photograph of this humongous cylinder, you know. And the thing that I encountered in Oakland was a cylinder. And a lot of the stories rotate around cylindrical objects and devices, conveyances. So there are tracks in all of this that go back. I don't know how far back it goes. I've only worked the aviation side of it, but the entire history of powered flight is covered with UAP reports of not just lights, but objects. And that's the whole problem with the FAA. The lights, you know, there's a chance it's a natural phenomenon. You can have a conversation about that. But if you're going to talk about objects, now you're talking about things that have outclassed anything we've ever put in the air since we went in the air. And those things haven't changed. Those phenomena that were reported in 1916 haven't changed from what are being reported today. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, we're talking structures, and they're actually the same. Even though they're being repeated over and over in different countries, we might see the top hat, we might see the disc, we might see the cylinder, whatever, but they're being repeatable. They are repeatable, is what I mean.
Yeah, there's trends in the data.
Yeah.
You know, and you can follow these trends. You can say, okay, I'm just going to look at cylinders and da-da-da-da-da. And you know, people say, well, it was Kenneth Arnold, you know, it was the Mount Rainier sightings, or no, it was Roswell. No, it was the nukes, right? But if you look at our database, you can see pilot reports in about 1942 start to climb vertically. And that has to do with fielding a global army with centralized reporting. They're mostly military reports, right? So years before Roswell happened or didn't happen, and years before the Manhattan Project and all of that, we were already on alert about these things. We already knew about them, you know. And when the Air Force was founded in September of 1947, its first marching orders under Nathan Twining were intelligence requirements on flying discs. And if you want to know what they know, look at that list of requirements, because it tells you what has been observed by people they considered qualified observers.
Right.
Same thing we've been seeing, right up to holes in the clouds like we had at O'Hare.
Yep.
Right.
So
cookie cutter clean too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were going to ask me a question, Tommy, about divers and
I'm sorry?
I think it was the swimmers off of Kona, that story with the dolphins.
Oh yeah, that's right. You mentioned something about you had a very interesting experience with dolphins and something underneath the water. If you'd like to elaborate that story, we'd love to hear it.
Sure. The subject came up in the context of talking about who aliens would talk to if they came to a planet with different beings with different sized brains, and and that's the way Earth is, right? We have all these mammals. We don't talk to each other much, probably more than we think we do with our dogs and cats and all of that stuff. But in any case, a lot of my friends here in Hawaii like to go out and swim with dolphins when they get the chance. So there are boats that will take them out. And often there are super positive dolphins that congregate out off of the Kona airport in about 2 mile deep water. That's right. In about 2 mile deep water. And they were out there one day on this pod of dolphins. They brought their cameras and they were all excited and jumped in the water. And there was a disc underneath the boat at about 100 feet. And the dolphins were interactive with the disc. The disc had red lights running around the rim. One of the three witnesses, they're all friends of mine, and one of them was a student of mine for freediving. And I was telling you guys, all of my beginners, in order to go to an intermediate class, have to be able to swim to 100 feet on their breath, just swim down 100 feet and back up again. And so Rue was fully capable of doing that. She dove When she got close to it, she thought she was being stung by stomatocysts, by jellyfish stingers. They break off, and you'll swim into them sometimes. But the dolphins didn't seem to be bothered at all. But she felt that the disc had repelled her specifically. And they watched this thing for a while, I'm told. Of course, these are all anecdotes, but the plural of anecdote is data. So, you start collecting this stuff, and it means something. It means people are wacky, or it means there's UFOs and dolphins interacting. Reality is what it is. You work with it, and it'll tell you what you need to know.
Well, and you have to work within it as well, and that's what a lot of I think ufologists and a lot of other channels that we've seen, they're not really working within the realm of reality, even though we're talking about a supernatural type of experience, a subject here. And I think it's great you brought that up. You're absolutely right.
It's UFOtainment. And these experiences are truly transformative. And I could tell you what I went through in this last 20 years, okay, and how it changed me. And the person that's in front of you now was not the Ted Rowe of 20 years ago. And I've been through everything. I've been through homelessness. I've lost wife. I've lost family. I've been through all kinds of stuff. And I went through some serious training, and that saved the day in terms of training awareness and insight. But most of these people, they feel this call to get up on a microphone and they start blathering. And I think they're more adding to the din than they are. They think they're raising awareness, and they're really kind of confusing matters.
And many have their own agenda for other reasons.
That's right. They're there to feed their egos. They're there for this or that. And then there's some other reasons. And I want to mention this to you guys because we kind of touched on this recently. There are a number of players that are very interested in UFOs and UAP data. Some of them are state players, different countries, and they're operating at the state level. Others are private players. There are private foundations that are studying UAP data and trying to gather as much as they can on it. They're funded by rich people. And then there are other organizations that are collecting the data and preparing it into security documents and selling those documents. Okay, so all of this is going on inside Facebook and the other places where UAP researchers congregate. And a lot of the researchers you think are researchers are probably not what you think they are in terms of collecting data and dispersing data and confusing the subject and keeping certain narratives moving that sort of run counter to the actual realities of what's going on. All of this, there's a bunch of players in all of this. I didn't really realize it when I got into it. And I tried not to think about it for the first 10 years or so that I was doing it, even though everybody around me was absolutely paranoid.
So you're talking about counterintelligence, disinformation, propaganda.
Yes, that too. Yes, that along with data collection, trying to get the real data and then trying to confuse the story. Trying to keep the narrative mixed up so that people can't really get a handle on what's happening. If somebody is moving in a direction that looks like it's productive, screwing them, or literally getting them out of the picture. I know it sounds dramatic and everything, but I've dealt with death threats.
Oh, sure.
I've dealt with blackmail threats. I've certainly been verbally, and bad things have been said about me. I endure, but sometimes it gets worse than I've been through. And I think that anybody getting into this field that's serious about getting into it, you should know the lay of the land.
Know the pitfalls, because there are some.
And they don't really want to become media darlings. Okay, I'm out here because I've got a mission and a message. I know what I want to say, who I want to say it to, and why. Okay. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
Right.
And I think other people are here because they got to have content. They've got to be seen in public. They got to be showing people what they're doing and how important they are to the whole thing and saying profound, deep things and all. That's not what this situation needs. We need to go straight at it and resolve it. Get the egos out of the way and just resolve it. And if it's fantabulation and nonsense, then so be it. And if it's not, get your serious face on.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
this is important. If you really believe that ET incursions are happening,
Yeah.
stop fooling around with it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's kind of
Right.
like this mission, if you accept it, Tim. That's what's kind of at to a degree. Yeah.
I've accepted it since my first sighting back in like 1996.
It's a
Yeah.
calling.
So yeah,
It's a calling.
Yeah, it is. And the thing is, you want to be careful about why you think you're called
Mm-hmm.
and what you think you're called to do.
Yeah.
You know, for the longest time after that thing in Oakland, I was really sick. And all of a sudden, it was like, then Dick Haynes shows up a couple of months later. I wrote this letter to the PR office at Ames Research Center, and a couple hours later, Dick Haynes shows up, wants to talk to me and my friends, and then next thing you know, I'm running this premier program with Dr. Valee and Dr. Haynes and Dr. Heisch and all these NASA engineers and all these people, and I was just an experiencer who was trying to figure out what the hell happened to me. You know, and why it was happening. I didn't have the capacity, and I certainly didn't have any idea of what I was stepping to in this morass of ufology.
Yeah.
And everything I do is pretty much to push the ball in another direction away from ufology. I don't do a lot of conferences, this kind of thing. I tend to stay out of the big conversations. My opinion, oftentimes it's to kind of make the bad man stop asking questions when I show up. So it's kind of best that I don't come in and rain on people's parades. You know,
we really appreciate the fact that you stepped out of the box and came here to talk to us and our viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, it's kind of like one of the reasons that I'm here with Tim and Tommy at this point is because the experience I had when I was like back in 1973. And there's a feeling that came over me when I saw the white light initially. It was either from the light or the occupants in the ship. That every time I watch the intro to UFO Man, or I think about the incident or whatever it is, just like now, there's this energy vibration that just comes over my whole body and mimics exactly what I have. I'll never be able to forget it. Feels really cool, but it's more than just a memory. I live with it every day. So
well, and that's the truth of it. These things, they're heavy, and those of us that have a sense of responsibility to it recognize that weight. And it may not be a good thing, and that just makes it even heavier.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you really understand the data and what's going on, like I've been looking at military aircraft cases for quite a while, you know, and talking to military flyers, it doesn't look promising. You know, it doesn't look like they're good guys, and people just need to hold that in the back of their heads that, you know, we haven't resolved this yet, and we don't know that we're safe. And just because we got through today and we got through yesterday, no guarantees about tomorrow.
Yeah, I always wondered when they sent out that golden record on the satellite into space, you know, was that a smart idea or not?
So I have real problems with this idea of beaming columnated signals off the planet to talk to aliens on the bet that they can't come here.
Well, supposedly the Chinese right now are in communication with them.
You know, the rumors are rife, you know.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say because, I mean, heck, you could be like Ben Rich, you know, and just put it out there that, hell, we can do all this stuff and just enough to get the other team off balance. Have the Russians running back and checking can they do all that stuff, you know, like that. Maybe we can. It just makes a good story. It's a good bluff, you know. Yeah. If we could, we wouldn't have to worry about little gray brother creeping around our nuclear sites and rolling in on our bases. So, you know, I don't share Corso's optimism at the end of how we defeated the alien threat with our Redstone missile batteries, you know. But so anyway, people should be very, very careful about all of the information around this. I don't have the last word on it, other than the time is for vigilance, not debate. We need to be looking and watching and collecting data and seeing what it shows us. And it's going to show us a few things. It's going to show us some things about ourselves, but then it's going to show us some things about reality. And I know that history is going to vindicate people like myself and many of your listeners, I'm sure, and you guys, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for being here, Ted. We really appreciate it. Tommy, any last comments?
Again, Ted, thank you for being here, sir. Very enlightening. You were a fantastic guest. You're, of course, welcome to come back anytime you like. Really like your insights, your stories, sir. It was just a very, very pleasure to have you here. Absolutely.
Yes, very,
My pleasure.
very enlightening.
Yeah, we
My
have people
pleasure,
in the
you guys.
chat room wanting you to come back already.
Yes, a lot of people in the chat.
Happy to do it. If anybody needs to talk to me, it's info@narcap.org or find me on Twitter.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
A lot of people are enjoying the unequivocal, intelligent communication we've had tonight. Sometimes we kind of deal with communication that isn't quite so empirical.
Yeah.
So it was very nice to have that.
I mean,
so thank you.
Reading comments from the chat room from Bob Gray, Mr. Rose, awesome. Stargate Traveler, love the dolphin story. NENNINE 1, thank you, Ted M. Please come back. Amanda B, now I want to call you Uncle Ted.
I've been called worse.
Yeah. So Ted Rose, such a great evening with you. Must be a full moon from Bobby Broadway. So yeah, the people really love the opportunity that we had to bring you here and spend some of your time to go ahead and share the unbelievable information that you've experienced and for who you are and what you're doing with NARCAP. It's, you know, it's listening to kind of where we're at today and what's going on. The organization you lead is needed more than anything, really. And it's
do what we can.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your work is needed. You need to keep fighting the good fight because without people like you in agencies and organizations like yours, we wouldn't have that information. We wouldn't have that data.
Well,
see, we wouldn't have the open source.
Right, and somebody has to call for it, and then people have to rally to it. So that's the other side of it. I've got a journal. People start writing. Write your essays, pick a thesis and work it through and then put it up there. It's about debate. It's not about being right. It's putting your idea up there. Somebody's going to come along and maybe you're mostly right or maybe you're not right at all, but get in the game. We need your thoughts, you know, and I can be reached through the NARCAP website and there's a phone number on there too. If anybody wants to talk, I'm available.
Okay, we'll put that out in the summary, everybody in the chat, so that you know about his website and his contact information.
Yeah, his Twitter account, etc. So he's Ted is really a great guy and easy to be in contact with. So we look forward to being in contact with you again in the future.
Sure, I'm available. Take care. Mahalo.
Okay, well,
mahalo. Hang loose.
Thank you much. Got it. Take care, man. Are you going to hang around? Or
yeah, I can sit in for a few minutes here.
Oh, sure. Cool, yeah. We've got a
we got a UFO video review of some stuff I found online. We're going to talk about them as we go through them.
Okay.
Here we go. I gotta bring it up.
Love to hear your insight on these, Ted.
Yeah, okay. Some of them we already know are kind of, you know. Anyways,
sure.
Here we go.
Well, that's intimidating.
Hey, Tim, there's no audio from that.
Okay, now that's probably the real deal right there. That'd be my guess. You need to know where it was shot from and whether you're getting a reflection off of a window from something behind you. But that fits in the. I would want to know more about that video.
It was filmed outside. It was filmed in Tallahassee, Florida. I do know that for a fact.
Is there a beam coming down from this one?
Yes.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Something.
I remember I was telling you how the cylinder that I saw was transparent and it lit bright yellow on the inside.
Yeah.
Boy, what?
This does too. Watch. This does too. Watch. There it goes. Right, and then it turns purple. See that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's oxygen band. That's oxygen. The red orange is the helium band. So that's helium ionization, and the purple is oxygen. The violet's oxygen.
Yeah.
And all it means is energy is moving through atmospheric oxygen and exciting it. So it goes purple.
I
Very
think
cool.
the light beam is really cool, and they were very lucky to have caught this.
I think so.
And I noticed that when it becomes orange, that the beam kind of pulls up and disappears.
Uh-huh.
And then when
Yeah.
it turns purple, it's back again.
Mhm.
Watch.
This looks a lot like what I saw in Oakland, I have to tell you.
Okay, we're on to video number 2.
Nice.
Okay, come on. This is unknown location. I don't know the location, but let me turn on the sound so you can hear the language.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's no audio still, Tim.
You can't hear the audio?
No.
audio.
That's right.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
It's okay. I think I can get.
Yeah, well, it happened in an Eastern European country. I don't know which one. It almost sounded like Ukraine.
Uh-huh. I think it's probably something to look at, that one, because of the movement of the camera relative to the target. They aren't able to get a good fix on it, right? So they're moving, but it's there, right? It's not stabilized in the picture, is my point.
Right.
And here it is where they've slowed it down. So you can pretty well tell it's not an airplane or a balloon. Yeah.
Well, that's your classic diamond-shaped UFO if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, definitely. There's a few different versions of the discs, and some of them are more diamond-shaped like that. They got a higher cupola and a lower underside, so they don't extend out so far.
I remember when we started this, Tim said the most intelligent thing that I've heard yet. And he said, well, think about it like this. Of course, there are going to be different models and makes. I mean, we've got Chrysler, Ford, Toyota here. I mean, of course, they're probably going to have all kinds of different makes and models for different purposes and things of that nature. So.
Yeah.
Well, that's reasonable. I've been profiling them, and so far I've only dealt with the main profiles, which are the discs, spheres, cylinders, parallelograms, triangles.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all the same philosophy of design, which is, I think, terribly interesting too.
Yeah. We've seen ones lately that have looked like, two pyramids put together kind of on the base, and they're spinning and rotating around.
I've seen that too. Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about this one because I have a couple comments, but here you go. This is a couple people seeing all these lights moving along the top of the power lines. And what I noticed is they're white, they're not gold, and they're not flickering with a flame like a Chinese lantern. So what are they?
Not Starlink?
Not Starlink. This is too low. It's right above the power lines.
Well, I'm guessing they're behind the power lines and back a ways.
Yeah, but they're not up in space.
No, they're not. Flights of military aircraft, maybe. There's not enough data there to really gather something. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
They're lights in the sky and they're in movement, but it's hard to say something definitive about them.
Right.
I would have to know about the location, whether there's military installations around, this kind of thing, to kind of really narrow it down. If you had a date and a time, you could actually even find out if anything was in motion.
Right.
It doesn't look like a standard formation,
Right. If I remember correctly, this was over Suisun, Suisun, California.
Yeah, that's very military. That's just right outside the Bay Area, between Bay Area and San Francisco. But there's been some interesting reports out of that area too. My friend Ruben Uriarte is the Northern California MUFON director, and he's got some things to say about these things, I'm sure.
Okay, take a look at this one, Ted. When I enlarge it, it's much clearer. Right now, it doesn't look like much, but give it time.
Oh. That's actually a pretty good sized object.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's just plain weird. I don't even know what to say about that. That is just plain weird. And I run into these once in a while. They're just outside of my experience. But the lighting on that is just really odd.
Yeah, it looks almost golden metal flake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it looks like lights coming out of it. It's almost like show lights, you know, on a stage lights, how they rotate out, you know?
Right. And it looks like an X. Let's see if I can get the X. It's like right about, well, almost. Right there. See it? There's an X of lights right there.
My guess is that's a big damn disc with a bunch of crap underneath it. But we'd have to really tear that video apart and even get an idea. But my guess is that's one single object.
I can tell you where that was too. That was Ontario, Canada.
Huh. You know, Lake Ontario's got a real history of this kind of stuff. And their orb watch. There was a woman that used to sit out there and collect orange light videos by the dozens. Massimo Teodorani went out there, a friend of mine, Dr. Teodorani, a researcher, collected some data on all of that. Very interesting. Have you guys looked at Hestelin at all?
Yes, Hestelin, Norway, sure.
Yes. Yeah, I met Erling at a site out in the Southwest that he said it was like Hestelin on steroids. I had a very unusual time there. Oh, that's just plain.
This is over northern Chile.
Okay.
And the guy is saying Los OVNIs, Platillo,
Right.
which means UFOs or platter or saucer.
Yeah. 6.
I think there are 7.
Yeah.
Now, I do get closer so you can see it better, but
You know, the first thing I think of when I look at these things are either satellite deployments or flares. You know, they're deployed behind a plane, but if they don't drop, if they don't lose altitude, if they don't go out in a sequence the same way they, you know, would have been dropped, then then they're, you know, they're not.
Right.
This looks like it's losing altitude.
But it has not gone out.
Right. Right. Well, you know, the video everybody talks about with the Phoenix lights is actually flares falling behind the Sangre de Cristo. But the other phenomena is the real deal. I talked to Lynn Katai about this extensively, and she showed me the videos that she had shot of UAP in the week or so prior to the actual main event there in Phoenix. And it was very interesting. But what people commonly think of with the Phoenix experience, that isn't the UAP.
Right. The UAP was different. It was triangular, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a chevron. If you listen to the Lay family, Tim Lay, talk about it, yeah. I talked to a witness. He said he could park the entire fleet of B-2s on one wing.
Wow.
It was that big. But that was one of them. There were others.
Watch that light in the sky.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Huh.
It's got things coming out of it.
Yeah. One wonders why he decided to film that to begin with, before it happened.
The comment is that he saw a light in the overcast and wondered what it was and was filming it.
Okay.
Now, to justify whether that's the truth or not, I can't say because I don't know the person personally. So I cannot say that. But when you hear his reaction audibly, it's pure shock that something came out of it.
Does the video start with the ball of light already there?
Oh, with that light right there? Yeah.
Okay.
The only thing I don't agree with is how it disappears. I think that may have been edited, and you'll see that in a moment.
You know, are you guys familiar with the Tehran 1976 case in Iran?
Yes.
Okay, so the second F4 closes with the cylinder. The weapons wizard gets tone with his sidewinder, loses his console, and the cylinder deploys a ball of light towards his aircraft. He does a negative G turn, leaves it in the dust as best he can. It reattaches back to the main device. Just a similar story, you know, of that kind of thing. We've got a lot of stories of UFOs having baby UFOs or collecting baby UFOs into, you know, there's a lot of that kind of thing. I personally haven't seen it, though. I've seen a little bit of everything, it seems like.
Here we go. The lady said she filmed this outside of her bathroom window. Now, I think the squaring effect is from the screen.
Yeah, that's from
that she filmed through.
Yeah.
And when it expands, it's her camera focusing.
It's interesting because it's bending the light around the wires. So what she's looking at has got some red light in it, I'm thinking. I don't know. That's inconclusive.
Yeah,
right.
That's a tough one to call there.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go on to video 8. This is over Utica, New York.
Oh, yeah.
Now I will zoom in so you can take a better look at it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Formation.
Yeah. Talking about formations, we have a video on the channel, Ted, that features a freaking fleet of cylinders videotaped over Mexico. And there had to be 15, 20 of them there in formation.
Interesting.
Yeah. And when I saw that, it just gave me freaking chills because, well.
Yeah, I know why. I get it. Every now and then they do it for me too. I've seen this before, something like this. This is similar to what my student videoed over Kealakekua Bay when it went between him and the bay. The time I saw it, it was a group of 17. I counted all of them, and they were all kind of milling about. They weren't airplanes. They weren't birds. I'm used to seeing groups of birds. And that's the first thing I do when I look at these is, hey, is that a flight of migrating birds, you know?
Right.
Because and you can tell whether it is or not. And so the one I saw had 17 of them in it. And then at one point, it all started rotating in the same direction. And then one at a time, they went to sea. This was over Kona Town. It didn't have anything to do with me, but I was just looking at it, trying to figure out what the hell it was. So I've seen that before, and there's a lot of them. Tremonton, Utah. That's a real famous video, way back, 1960s. Tremonton, Utah. Same story, same video. And you can find groups of the videos of these white dots that aren't birds. Kind of over the history of all of this, but I would start at Tremonton, Utah. That video.
One would wonder if those are like Tic Tac style ships.
One would wonder, but there's no way of telling.
No,
my guess is they're spheres, and what I've seen is that all of them, disc spheres, all of them can either have a very metallic coat or they have this ceramic look to them, where they look like China, you know,
right?
Or just, you know, really hard.
Don't they use ceramic on some of the space rockets when they go into space
Oh, sure.
for heat shielding?
Re-entry.
Well, they use it for that. They use it for all kinds of things. It's superconducting. They use it for all kinds of things. They use it in computing. And then, yeah, they use it in space. I would think that it's mainly the medium that is printable. You know, they print these ships, right, that are probably atom at a time, loaded with nanotech. The cylinder that I saw, that I could see inside of, everything that made it able to do what it did was in the hull. There was no, I could see under the deck, there was nothing under there. It was a void. And the lights were external to the cylinder itself, the big white lights, and they had their hands on a panel, and there was no instrumentation. There was no seats, no crew appointments, no nothing. Okay, it was very simple. And I'm guessing, so it's nanotech, so it would have to be printed, right? The device would have to be printed with the nano machinery in it, right, in order for it to do what it does. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, we gotta show you this one.
Okay.
Because we have something to show that we can prove that is not a real UFO, we don't think.
Huh.
I gotta see which one it is first. Yeah, this one.
Oh, look at that. It's a kite.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
a lot of people were fooled by this video on ufology channels as possibly something alien, but I found the actual kite on Amazon. Let's pause this for a second. I found the kite. Here it is.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
It's called a 23-foot Paul parafoil kite.
Yeah.
And when you move it, it will whip its arms around.
Yeah.
So that is definitely not a UFO. And we
Well, there's a whole kite subculture out there, you know. They with them. They just, you know, they're a whole subculture of kite people.
Yeah.
Indonesia's really big on kite fighting too.
Mm-hmm.
So we just wanted people to see this. At first, I thought it was a bug on the lens, maybe, or I was leaning toward kite, but I didn't know for sure.
Yeah.
Until somebody in my chat room said, "Yeah, that's a kite."
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're actually moving.
Sometimes
forward.
this stuff can fool you, you know. Yeah. But the other thing to remember too is go back to Hynek's strangeness factor. Is it middle of the road or is it outlier data? You know, is it a disk, sphere, cylinder, you know, in the common reported, you know, of what people talk about, or is it oddball? And it doesn't mean it isn't necessarily bona fide because it's oddball, but note that it's oddball. You know what I mean? Note that it's not in the normal pattern of things, you know, and then
that's why we're trying to debunk videos from time to time now.
Oh, it's a good plan.
Yeah.
Here's one here, the last video that I have questions about. This was taken over Mexico City, allegedly. It appears like a disc, but when you see the close-ups, I think it's too good to be true. And because of that, I'm ruling it out. And take a look at it. You'll see what I mean.
Oh. I think combined with the lack of context, no ground, no building, no, you know what I mean?
Wait till you see the enlargements. There we go.
Oh, yeah, no, that's CGI.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
again, remember strangeness factor, right? Way outside, you know.
Right. I wanted people to see it so that they know that that is definitely not a UFO. And actually, we debunked it on our channel. And I just wanted to show people that, yes, we do know the difference sometimes between fake UFOs and real ones.
Yeah. Sometimes it comes down to comments. And if you look at the definition of UAP, it's on our website. That's what it tells you, you know, that you know, the appearance and or flight dynamics of which does not suggest a common known aerial phenomenon, you know. And then you start working from there, and and common sense really matters. And like I said, experience it. Is this in the ballpark of what people have been reporting? I've seen things, like this Tic Tac thing. Well, what I see as what they're drawing and what they're presenting as this Tic Tac is outlier data. We don't have those in ufology going back. I've got 1,300 pilot cases going back 100 years. I don't have those. I don't have a capsule shape with a couple little thingers on the bottom of it. Okay, so that's where you start asking yourself questions, all right? Whether or not this is bona fide, is it Earth Tech? Is it disinfo? Is it,
right.
You know what I mean? Why is it not consistent with what everybody else says they see?
Hey, Tommy, did you want to talk about that fake UFO sighting in Montreal?
Yeah, let's go ahead and bring that up, Tim. I'm glad you mentioned that. Listen, this was actually sent to us, excuse me, from Anita Gift, one of our viewers, and she was very excited about it, and she asked me to actually play the video on the site. But the thing about it is,
I've seen this. It's a CGI. I've seen this. I know the one. I just looked at this like a day or two ago.
Yeah. Well, we really do appreciate folks for sending things in, especially Anita. Thank you so much for that. We are aware of this sighting, and unfortunately, we've debunked that one already. But I mean, it's very interesting when you see it. I mean, it's pretty mind blowing.
Oh,
But
yeah, and it's also one of our safety factors, right? It's in Class B restricted airspace, uncontrolled, right? Which is one of our safety. It's the idea is based on the O'Hare case. Okay, so. You start looking at how people develop these ideas and concepts and what people seem to think UFOs are versus what are actually reported as UFOs, and then start looking a little more closely at the incidents themselves and the environment they take place in and the reporting environment, who's reacting to it,
Yeah.
But I did just want to say, please keep on sending them to us, folks. Whatever you have, we'll look at anything.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Send them in to us. We're very happy to receive those.
And
But
we're
I
extremely
take
grateful.
all the videos.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No,
I was
we're
saying, go ahead. Go ahead, Tim.
I was just going to say we're extremely grateful for your content contributions, and we will definitely share them, whether they be real or fake, because either way we can provide the information necessary to you, the viewer, and to anyone who's watching online.
Yeah. Because that way it gives you what we need to be, gives you what you need to help you recognize what's good data and what's bad data. And considering all the crap that can be out there on YouTube of people are just going and just trying to push this to get views and content and everything else, there's I need to be serious. And
well, you have to be discriminating as a consumer around this subject. If you really want to know the information and you're not just here to be entertained, then you really got to start weeding out the crap. And as people become more competent with CGI and with storytelling and so on, then you have to be more discerning and more careful. Ask yourself who's doing this and why, and it doesn't mean you have to be like paranoid, but you should always be suspicious. And I get cases brought to me all the time. I had a fellow a few months ago, he brought a photograph to me and it's looking out over the ocean from a nice beachfront, and there's a wooden walkway path, right? And he says his daughter was out with her tablet, and she just took a picture, and then he took a look at the picture she took later, and here's this amazing disc in it. So I take a look at it, and I go, geez, that really looks like a ceiling lamp. Oh, no, it was taken outside. And so I go in and I do some filter work on it just to bring it up, so you can see the ceiling, you can see the chain hanging off of it, and it's a glass ceiling lamp and it's got stars on it. So I go look up the make and model. I find it on the internet and I send him a place where he can go and order another one to go with the one he's got in this picture. And he was really adamant. Now I don't know if he was trying to trip me up or not with his story, but the story didn't vibe. That picture was taken indoors, and it was a reflection of the light that was behind the photographer. So I never heard back from him after that. But it doesn't do us any good to say something's anomalous if it isn't. Specifically, if we want to understand what the anomaly is about, then we're just polluting our own data set, and that's not how you get to the bottom of this. So.
Right. Okay, I have one last video I want to play. It's only 1:37, so guys, you don't have to suffer through too long of a video clip here. Let's see here. I gotta make the sound on this one.
Oh, there's a super chat.
Oh, from Thomas Fessler. Cool. We'll have to do that in a second, Thomas. Okay, here we go. Here's the what I want to play.
Can the task force finish its job by June 1st? Maybe not. It's a gigantic undertaking to search the entire national security system for all relevant videos and files, and then to seek input and analysis from other intelligence agencies. It is entirely possible the task force will have to ask Congress for more time. In a radio interview in late December, Lou Elizondo announced he has left To the Stars Academy, the company which coaxed him into coming forward in 2017. Also departed is veteran intelligence official Chris Mellon. Both men say they're still supportive of TTSA, but are now largely focused on behind-the-scenes work in Washington to encourage Congress and the Pentagon to move the UFO ball down the field. Elizondo cautioned the public to lower its expectations about the task force report, saying, quote, "This is a process, not an event. We're asking the U.S. government to engage in something that historically it never wanted to engage in. I think a lot of people have these false hopes that disclosure is here and all of a sudden have this huge announcement by the U.S. government. Progress is being made," Elizondo says. The task force report will be just the beginning. He hopes Congress will authorize a permanent UAP program, one that has a budget and the authority to truly investigate a perplexing mystery.
Okay. So the message is don't expect too much.
No.
Just
Yeah,
like
that's about right.
just like Ted was saying earlier in our conversations that, yeah, they're not going to give out what everybody is thinking that they're going to give out.
Yeah. It's going to be a drip of water from an ocean of information. Most of the stuff they're going to keep out of our purview and basically say it's a matter of national security, and they're not going to give us the information that all of us would love to hear.
Right, and it's all going to be redacted.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing to keep in mind here, though, is that these incidents take place in front of entire cities, and in front of professionals, in front of academics, in front of whole cross sections of society. And there's no reason that citizen science can't carry the weight, and we don't have to wait for the government to tell us. Yeah, sure, they've got sensing systems. Maybe they can see them coming and going, when they slow down enough to be seen coming and going. But there's a lot we can learn, about what this is about, what's going on, about the social impact, about all of it that they're not addressing. And we don't need to wait for them. We need to just step up and start working the data, pick a thesis and start asking the questions, gather the information you can, write something, This is how we move the ball forward. You'll know disclosures happening, and this is for your listeners. You'll know disclosures happening when articles addressing ET incursions and related topics are in mainstream science journals. That's when you know it's been disclosed. That's when you know that the subject's moving forward. Not when the government is finally goaded into doing something, a dog and pony show for the taxpayers in order to placate the ones that are interested in UFOs. They know there's a big chunk of them, just like the advertisers do. So they kind of play to that a little bit. I think Louie's right to tone down what people should be expecting from all of this. We're not going to get what people are hoping for out of it. And in a way, I kind of hope it just kind of passes on, because as researchers, we could continue doing the work and not have this distraction cropping up every time you're trying to move down the road with one particular aspect of the phenomenon.
Yeah.
Right. That's why here on the channel, we kind of push a grassroots movement, a boots on the ground movement where people like ourselves, people like you, other people that are very interested in the empirical data to make the disclosure that people are looking for.
That's right.
We're pushing 2 hours, so Tim, we probably should move on.
I'm
Yes,
having a great
I know
time.
that.
It's been good.
Yeah, we'll stick around. We got a great show ahead of us.
Okay, Tommy, let's do your segment now, okay?
Sounds good. All right, folks. You know, Roswell is, we all know the story of Roswell. We're all aware of it. We've been hearing it for decades now. As many of you know, I actually just came back from Roswell a couple of weeks ago after coming down there and doing a mission, checking out the sights, sounds, talking to the people, that sort of thing. However, Roswell happened way back in the 50s, but it's not the first American UFO crash. No, folks, it's not. I want to introduce you folks to Ned. Ned is an alien that actually crashed in Aurora, Texas on April 17th of 1897. Now, why am I calling him Ned, you ask? Because when Ned was found after the crash was witnessed by several people on the ground, and you have to understand, this is 6 years, folks, before the Wright brothers' first flight, okay? So we didn't exactly have things flying through the air that weren't natural, like birds and things of that nature. So what's happened is, apparently, according to witnesses, an oblong, sort of a hot dog-shaped UFO. There'd been several of them actually circling the area, and one of them actually crashed. Let me go ahead and read this article here. There were several sightings of a great airship around Texas in the spring of 1897. Again, folks, 6 years before the Wright brothers. At least one of these flying crafts was reported to have crashed in Aurora on April 17th of 1897. The Tall Tale reports an airship crashing into Judge Proctor's windmill and bursting into flames. Among the wreckage, Aurora residents found the disfigured remains of an alien creature. The alien, we now call Ned, was given a proper Christian burial in a local Aurora cemetery. So think about that. These people are, by today's standards, fairly primitive. They're all real super God-fearing people. That religion was a real big part of the culture, at least at that time. And so everybody was what we call God-fearing. So when this thing crashed on this farm, they found it. They found an occupant inside of it. Well, they took the body and they gave it a proper Christian burial because that's what they were, that's what their beliefs dictated for them to do with it. They even gave the guy a name. They called it Ned. Okay. A newspaper article of the event still exists. Okay. This is from the actual air. I'm going to read the actual text from the newspaper. About around 6 o'clock this morning, the early risers of Aurora were astonished at the sudden appearance of the airship, which has been sailing around the country. So a lot of other people are seeing this as well. It was traveling due north and much nearer to the Earth than before. So this wasn't the first time that they'd seen it. Evidently, some of the machinery was out of order, for it was making a speed of only 10 or 12 miles an hour and gradually settling toward the Earth. It sailed over the public square, and when it reached the north part of town, it collided with the tower of Judge Proctor's windmill and went into pieces with a terrific explosion, scattering debris over several acres of ground, wrecking the windmill and the water tank and destroying the judge's flower garden. Okay? So what this is telling us is, according to the newspaper, the periodical of the time, this wasn't the first time that they'd seen this thing. It had been flying around, or maybe even more than one of them had been flying around the area for at least some time. The pilot of the ship is supposed to have been the only one on board, and while his remains were badly disfigured, enough of the original has been picked up to show that it was not an inhabitant of this world. So in other words, they were able to discern that they weren't looking at a human body. I mean, even though it was burned up and mashed up and all of that, they could still tell. And I'm sure, if you were to drop a piano on a human and drop a piano on a gray alien, well, you're probably going to be able to tell the difference if you lift the piano up, right? Probably what happened here. Let's see here. So again, this was 6 years before we were flying anything anywhere, and this happened. It's a very well documented case. However, it goes on. Tim, do you have that video that you wanted to, or those overlays?
I already showed them, but I'll do them again. This is the cemetery.
Okay. Now, the interesting thing about this is that when the body was given a burial and all that, they actually created a headstone for him. And there's a picture of the headstone. Now, I ask you folks, what does that look like to you? I mean, again, 6 years before flight and decades, well, at least a decade or so before anybody really saw an aircraft in the air, bam, there it is. Okay. Now, the interesting thing about this whole story is that there was, I think, I want to say it was History Channel. I believe it was History Channel. They had an expose piece on this or whatever, where they were actually going to send somebody out there, and they got a permit to extract the grave or exhume the grave and all of that and figure out exactly what's buried there, because they were getting metallic hits on it when they were using ground penetrating radar and things of that nature. So ironically, wouldn't you know, the actual night before they were going to go and do the dig, someone, an unknown person and or persons, visited the cemetery and cut a cylindrical hole down into this grave, okay, and extracted something. Nobody knows what they took. All they know is that the metal detector no longer goes off when it's run over that site or whatever. They also removed the headstone itself. Okay, so I mean, this had been there for 100 years, better part of 100 years or more, and all of a sudden, once the media gets interested in it and they're going to go extract it, someone goes out there and tampers with that grave. Now, why, folks? Why do you suppose they would have done that? Thomas, what are your thoughts?
Now, if someone is going and pulling that kind of stuff, and they're basically going there the day before, cutting a cylindrical hole down to the spot where it's at, that's weird in the first place. Secondly, the gravestone is gone. Someone did not want what was in that grave to be found. Government, someone else, but clearly, it was either someone didn't want other people to get there, or someone wanted to get whatever was there for themselves and take it away so no one else could know about what was really there.
Interesting. Tim, what are your thoughts?
I think it was probably the government. They knew about the media coverage, and because of the media coverage, they were trying to stop any exhumation of the gravesite, because there wouldn't be anything there to exhume if they got rid of the metallic ping, which would be whatever was metal buried in that gravesite. So if they got rid of it, then there's nothing of interest. It might just be a decayed body. The thing is, what determines interest? In my opinion, if it's an alien body, you're going to have different DNA. So that would be very interesting to me if it was still there. I mean, bones, whatever,
right?
Cartilage, whatever. But I think it was the government that messed with it. I don't think it was some local yokel that came down there and dug a hole. I do know that they think it was somebody local that stole the stone to protect the gravesite, because they don't want anybody messing with it.
Could very well be. Ted, do you have any thoughts on this story?
Well, we have a lot of these historical references to things that have happened, and I always just take them in. I'm aware of a crash in the Little Belt Mountains of Montana that happened much earlier, in the 1800s. It was trappers found it, apparently. So these aren't new stories. And also, the idea of collecting data before people can get it. There are a lot of factions, as I mentioned earlier in our talk. It isn't just government. There's a lot of factions, and it could be, little gray brother could have a faction here. He could have operatives. Right. He could have, there's if you want to think outside the box, or if you want to start thinking about this for real, think about that he's got either humans that are recruited and working for him, or he's got other abilities to acquire human intelligence, grounded intelligence, right? Yeah. Right. So I'm never really sure who the players are at any one point, but those are the main suspects: government, the other team, and then adversaries to the government. But yeah, there's factions in all of this, and that's the one thing to take away from it, I would imagine. When the JAL case happened, you guys are familiar with the JAL case, the Japan Airlines case?
Yes.
So up north of Anchorage, Kenji Terauchi's flying his plane in, and he's got this big giant thing with a couple of smaller things following him. And I spoke with John Callahan, who was director of aviation accidents and investigations for the FAA. He told me that he was on a dead run trying to get the radar, get all the data that he could on that before the CIA got to it. And he said he was there, he beat him just by hours. Mm-hmm. So, wow. And then he showed me plots, and he had the metal discs that they record the audio on, all of that stuff. So he had it all. But so there are a lot of people that are interested in this information and material, and you want to be really careful as a researcher who you're talking to and how you conduct yourself and who you communicate with while you're doing it.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess when it really comes down to it, it's just this has been going on in our country for quite some time. It's been going on worldwide. I mean, we did a show on art in the Renaissance period, where in places like Europe, where they would paint a painting of somebody, and then they would put a little Easter egg in the back of it, like it was a Mona Lisa, I think it is, Tim. It's got the guy looking up the UFO.
It's the Madonna and Child. Yeah,
Madonna and Child. Yeah, that's the one. So, I mean, we've seen this before. This has been going on for a very long time. And, this Aurora thing is just another example of a story that has eyewitnesses, okay? It has some physical evidence. I mean, we've seen photos of the stone, right? It had the media's attentions at the time, right? And it also has the very unique part that it's actually someone has actually thought enough about this to go out there and mess with that grave before somebody else exhumed it. I mean, it has everything. I love this story. I really do. I've always been a big fan of this one. And it just goes to show you that this has been going on before Roswell. Roswell is just another incident in a chain of incidents that have been happening for a very long time, folks.
Right. And I think the other thing is that if you stay focused on what has happened, you're going to miss what is happening. Mm-hmm. And I think history is important. I think there's things we can learn from all of this. It'd be nice to know what our government has learned about all of this, if anything. All of that would be great. But the incidents are ongoing. They're happening to us. Mm-hmm. Okay, and we can gather data. We can work the data. We just need to make a commitment to objectivity and documentation. If you're listeners and viewers out there, if you've got something on video, get all of the written data you can get: time, place, who, the type of machine used, what direction they were looking, time of day it was, just everything that you can get that would go along with that. And I want to mention something about your art too. You mentioned that Renaissance art carried that, oftentimes has these images in them that are a bit questionable. If there was a rule at a certain time that you couldn't produce art unless God was in there somewhere, some symbolism that reflected him. Okay, and so that's why some of these things look like angels, but some of them don't, and some of them really make you wonder, what that artist saw and why he was plugging that in there as his evidence of God watching, his God's eye, But that's the other part of it. Know the context in history. If you're going to talk about that Renaissance art, make sure that find Renaissance art experts and talk to them. Why is this in here? They will tell you that was part of being a sanctioned artist. Easy.
Okay, Ted, I got to do something. Hold on a second here. We have a super sticker in the audience, so here we go. Super sticker, thank you.
Nice.
Gotta do it. Okay, nice. Now wait, here we go.
Nice. Gotta have fun with it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks 2X109. Appreciate you coming.
That was nice seeing you here. 2X109. Hey. Easy there, Loki.
Thanks, 2X109. Hey, Loki. Okay. All righty. Thomas, let's go into your segment now.
Absolutely. All right. Let me go.
Hold on a minute. Let me do my intro for you.
Okay.
Okay. We got a really cool intro for Thomas. Here we go.
a live stream earlier this year, we covered a story OIA request. The documents reveal the UAP debris material has the potential to do such amazing things as changing the speed of light, reducing invisibility, acting as a memory metal that returns to its original shape when deformed, and to compress electromagnetic energy. If you remember, after the release, the Pentagon backpedaled that the documents actually concerned a weapons program. This is where the UFO Man research team followed the breadcrumbs, linking the material to memory metals developed and released by Battelle in the past. In an update to the story, from just this last week, investigative reporter Anthony Braglia from UFOexplorations.com released new findings to strengthen the case that the Pentagon has indeed studied these UAP materials and has been transferring the technology to academia and the private sector to companies like Battelle. In reply to Braglia's FOIA request, that I have to say took him over 3.5 years to obtain, think about that, were technical documents on futuristic materials in development that are believed to be based on retrieved UFOs or pieces of UFOs. The reports received are not basic research, which would show the chemical and elemental composition of the material, but are applied research. This takes basic research and applies it to developing technical concepts that could one day be made workable in the real world. Of note, several of the documents have been marked with a text block that reads in part, quote, "This product is one of a series of advanced technology reports produced in fiscal year 2009 under the Defense Intelligence Agency. The reports were developed under contract as quote-unquote work product to the AAWSA, or Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program. This was the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program's AATIP former name. While the DIA program manager's name was redacted, another version of the document reported by the highly respected Australian UFO investigator Keith Basterfield, the name of the program manager was not deleted. Whoops. For the record, the program manager's name is Dr. James Lakaski. He is the man who personally reviewed and managed the creations of the document. While Dr. James Lakaski is not a familiar name in the world of UFOs, it should be. He was a longtime Defense Intelligence Agency senior rocket scientist and acknowledged as an expert in subjects including advanced concepts for aircraft, rocket power, and propulsion. But at the same time, he was also the program manager for the Pentagon UFO study as predecessor to, you guessed it, no other than Lou Elizondo. Interesting enough, Elizondo provided clues about Lakaski's in a post made on to the Stars Academy website on November 1st, 2018. Quote, "Certain senior government officials thought our collection of facts on UAP was dangerous to their philosophical beliefs. In fact, my AATIP predecessor's career was ruined because of misplaced fear by an elite few. Rather than accepting the data as provided by a top-ranked rocket scientist, they decided the data was a threat to their belief system and instead destroyed his career because of it." Do you need to play the animation, Tim?
Yeah, can you put it on pause?
It's already paused.
Here we go, Xopha. You get it. I gotta get your. Hold on a second here. Thank you very much, Xopha. Really appreciate it. Go ahead, Thomas.
Unfortunately, Lakaski's conclusions about UFOs cost him his jobs, clearly from those centered in the religious right. Support for Lukaszki's UFO study involvement comes from many sources, including Roger Gesell, a Swedish UFO researcher who specializes in filing FOIA, and an associate, Keith Basterfield. Through tracing timelines, publishing work, they have conclusively determined that Lukaszki was a program manager in UFO research. Interesting. The original acronym for AATIP was AAWSAP, or Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program. For the record, Dr. James Lukaszki was the program manager for AAWSAP. It's known that Lukaszki has had a strong interest in UFO and ET activity, and he had expressed interest in visiting a famed 550-acre ranch in Utah referred to as the Skinwalker Ranch, where for over half a century, paranormal and UFO and orb phenomenon are reputed to have occurred. At the time, the ranch was owned by none other than Robert Bigelow. Dun, dun, dun. An individual with questionable intentions who was suspected, but like the Pentagon has denied, to have held UFO debris for storage in specifically modified facilities under the same AATIP contract. The fact is that the DIA scientist, Dr. James Lukaszki, who managed the program that produced the technical documents received, proves they relate to UFO debris and their applications in aerospace research. Lukaszki has refused all approaches by Anthony Braglia, opting not to discuss the matter. And further, researcher Mark Sisodi recently obtained an internal email that just shows how orchestrated and deceiving the Department of Defense can be when it comes to UAPs. Keep in mind this information when you're setting your expectations for the upcoming UAP report. Currently, it's rumored that it's going to be delayed. However, it's not just because of funding, it's because internal agencies within the federal government are refusing to share their information. Now, the July 10th, 2020 email from Joe Gradisher from the department, he's the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Information Warfare, to Jeff Jones of the Navy Office of Information. Gradisher warns Jones about how to reply to UFO, UAP-related Freedom of Information Act requests. In the email, certain excerpts stand out. Quote, from a public affairs perspective, all media inquiries on UAPs go to DOD Public Affairs, Sue Go. Carbon copied. Keeping in the loop, as we should coordinate closely. To date, we have not authorized any media interviews on the subject. Make no comment. The nuances of all of this are such that any deviations from the statement that the DOD makes result in multiple news stories and additional FOIA requests at various levels. If we need to, well, coordinate with you on specific responses depending on the questions asked. Also, generally speaking, we let the normal FOIA process work as it's supposed to, but we have to be requesting that FOIA offices coordinate with us on UAP-focused FOIA responses before. That doesn't sound that honest. Now, there is a security classification guidance document at the secret level that addresses the UAP issue and what may or may not be discussed publicly. Sugo, referred to in the email, is the very Pentagon spokesperson who has contradicted the DIA in saying that the FOIA requests released to Braglia, instead of being related to UFOs, related to weapons research. Disinformation. Go has had a demonstrated and long history of issuing conflicting and confusing statements on UFO and UAP matters. When one breaks down the email, one is appalled at the FOIA games that are played when it comes to UFOs and UAPs. UAP-related FOIA inquiries are to be treated with a different process than normal FOIA processes. The FOIA offices must coordinate with their superior office on these FOIA requests. All media inquiries on UAPs are to be run through Sue Go, Pentagon spokesperson. No media interviews have been authorized on the subject, and media inquiries are to receive no comment. If need be, particularly challenging responses to FOIAs should be coordinated with the relevant superior office. There is a guidance document, classified secret, that outlines what can and what cannot be said about UAPs. While this is very disturbing, beyond a shadow of a doubt, it proves an effort of coordination, disinformation from the Pentagon and U.S. agencies. As our understanding and significance of the UFO debris Pentagon papers unfolds, we learn that the march of science has been stepped up by technologies from another world. While not minimizing the achievements of man, it rather enhances them.
Thanks, Thomas.
Great. Awesome.
What did I do there? There we go. Can't hear you, Thomas.
You can hear me now. Sorry about that. Yeah, thanks, Tim. It was really fun going ahead and putting that together, and it's a great contribution to go ahead and really show the coordinated cover-up that's going on and disinformation about how they're trying to control the message, what they don't want to release, and it is what it is. So that's
good job. Well done. Thanks.
You. And I mean, folks, like we've been trying to really allude to, in fact, we've outright said it. If we're really expecting this huge revelation from the government after this 180-day thing, I think we're all going to be I think most people are going to be very disappointed. I think the four panelists here and most of you folks are prepared for the fact that we're going to get redacted documents at best. And like everybody said, I mean, if there is anything questionable at all, it'll be like, oh, that's national security. You can't know that. So I don't think this is, I mean, I wish they would open up the books. I wish they would, but I just don't see it happening, folks. Ted, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, that Keith's a good researcher, you know, and the idea that the government or the Pentagon, if they have any of this information, that they would ever talk about it is unlikely. And I think there's a problem with this, not in the idea of everybody should know about this, but more about the idea that if it's a global problem and a global defense issue, we need to be sharing it with the planet so we can coordinate with the planet if we need to in order to deal with it. And I don't see that happening. I don't know, but I'm not expecting anything out of the UAP task force report, and that information that Thomas just shared with us is pretty damning. You know?
Yeah,
agreed, absolutely.
One of the things they brought up was Bigelow denying what he was doing in his basement, which, you know, he can say what he wants, but it's not completely believable.
Yeah.
Well, they're trying to pull off plausible deniability, but deniability is no longer plausible. I mean, they've hit that wall now, you know.
Right. They can deny specific facts, but they can't deny the story. And that's kind of where they're at right now. You can't pin me down, you know. I can zigzag left, right, and all of this all day long, and they can. But that's what I was referring to before. We can do this work. We're the ones that are seeing these things. We see them more often than the military does. We interact with them more often than the military does, I hope. And we know more about all of that than they do if we can get it all into a pile and start working it like intelligent people instead of ego-driven, important personalities.
Rock star ufologists, yes.
Or stop looking at it from a military standpoint. You know, start looking at it as a global issue and not a balance of power thing. But then that would take disclosure from our own government to other governments saying, okay, well, we've talked about this really ad nauseum on the channel, but if we were to come out and say, hey, we've had technology that we've been messing with that crashed here, that's 10,000 years or so ahead or more, what are the other superpowers going to think at that point? I mean, this could cause, a serious crisis on the planet militarily.
And do you think
balance of power?
Uh-oh.
And we're not the only ones that have it. And, we've seen what autocrats are like, and we've kind of seen how they start, how they develop. You're going to put that kind of information in the hands of a Putin,
right? Or
Xi,
Chinese communist, or
you know what I mean? Right. What if one hits the ground in North Korea?
We've got a problem because of the very duality of mankind.
Well, and that's it. That's it right there. The fact that everybody's looking for a leg up on each other, and they're looking for the nearest weapon. That old quote about diplomacy is, saying "nice dog" until you can get a big stick.
Yep.
Well, this is a big
mutually
stick.
assured destruction.
Yeah, and this is an extinction event, 20 different angles. You know what I mean? As far as this phenomenon and human beings go, we're really a wretched bunch, and I would like to think that we could pull it together as a planet and make this work. But when you have half the world that hasn't made or received a telephone call, the gap is wide, and just like it's wide between those who have power and the rest of us.
Right.
We have to do as much as we can to do science on this subject, and we can get data and we can find answers, and it'll be as good as anybody else's, provided we follow the same rules.
Well, Ted, it looks like we're losing some of your connection. Your audio is really kind of messed up. So what we're going to do is we're going to end the live stream and ask everybody for their last comments. Tommy?
Folks, thanks for coming out. I think we had a great show. Ted, thank you, sir, for coming. I mean, it's just a very enlightening show. Very awesome. Thank you for giving us the time, sir. The other thing I wanted to mention, sir, is that we do have a new website coming up. It's going to be, it should be up about midweek. It's going to be UFOManNetwork.com. Hopefully we're going to do all kinds of really cool stuff with that. Of course, we're still going to be doing the same thing that we always do on the channel, but this is just going to give us sort of another avenue to be able to expand ourselves, if you will. Okay. But anyway, thanks for coming out, everybody. Thomas, great presentation as always. Tim, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You're more than welcome, Tommy. Thomas?
My pleasure.
Ted, thanks for coming. It was an awesome opportunity to hear a lot of, just a tip of the iceberg of information. In a lot of ways, you've enlightened me. And I look forward to what the future brings because, the perspective you brought, the way you look at it is truly unique, but it's something all of us need to really take to heart and listen to. Once again, thanks for coming. But more importantly, thanks to all of our fans who have been asking questions in the chat room, have been so supportive of this interview and our show tonight. We hope we hit this one out of the park for everybody, because I know for me, Ted, you hit it out of the park. Absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, Ted, thank you very much for appearing on my channel. I really appreciate it. You have enlightened the viewers with very deep research data, and that is something that we wanted to bring to the channel. So thank you very much from the bottom of my heart, and happy Easter. Gotta say that.
Right back at you, and big thanks to you and your listeners. Wishing everybody a good holiday. Take care, everybody.
All righty. And thank you to everyone in the chat room who participated and everybody who participated online. And good evening.